All right, Jillian, Ted, so excited to have both of you on the podcast. As we were just talking about a minute ago, I think you both have a really incredible energy towards sports business and sales the sales process. So excited to get both of you on the podcast. I want to give you a chance for those that don't know you to introduce yourselves really, really quickly. So Jillian, we'll start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks again, Brett, for having me on. So my name is Jillian Stoker, originally from Southern California, went to Long Beach State. My path to sales and ticket sales was a little, I guess, unorthodox as many. I was in a couple of other different industries before I actually was like, hey, there's a business side of the thing that I love, sports. So I did a little bit more research just in regards to getting on the business side, sports sales. So I got my foot in the door in minor league baseball with the Reno Aces. So spent 4 seasons there, just kind of navigating my way into ticket sales. So started in inside sales and worked my way up to a manager role in group sales. I got the opportunity to work for the Stockton Kings, where I am now director of ticket sales and service. So it's been quite a journey and learning a lot like along the way. So yeah, that's a little bit just kind of about my path in a couple minutes.
Ted?
That's phenomenal. Well, similar to Jillian, I've got some minor league baseball roots. I grew up in the sports business, and my pops worked for a number of teams growing up. And so by the time I got to Boston College, my alma mater, I think I had lived in 3 countries, 7 states, 15 plus houses. So I was a nomad, but one of those stops was Sacramento, where I am right now with the Sacramento Republic. So very, very fond and vivid memories of this area. And that's one of the things that brought me back here. My current role with the club, I oversee ticketing and premium, both for the USL club and AAA soccer, and also our Major League Soccer efforts as we look to build our new stadium and join the top flight in 2022. Taking a couple steps back, I really cut my teeth in the business at the 76ers during the trust the process years on that army of salespeople that I'm sure many people have heard about. Started as a sales associate, went the corporate AE route, and really developed a love and passion for coaching in this business. So I spent the last 5 seasons on the management side as an inside sales manager with the Sixers, overseeing senior level sales for the Devils. And then 2 years ago, I came out here to join the Republic for a number of different reasons that I'm sure we can get into, but excited about, the present with our club, given some of the circumstances I'm sure we'll dive into, but even more excited about the future with Major League Soccer ahead.
Yeah, and like I said, both the similar part of your backgrounds is being very successful, as salespeople before you got those next opportunities. So we'll flip this and start with Ted. If you think back to where you'd be as a salesperson right now, sitting for the 76ers, what do you think you'd be doing right now, given the crazy environment that we continue to find ourselves in at this point?
Yeah, that's $1 million question, Brett. I'm going to start pretty broad, and I'm sure we're going to dive in here throughout the conversation. I think first and foremost, you've got to really focus on having a strong mindset. And I think mental health and getting your mind in the back of the house in order is so critical right now. And I think as I evaluate our staff, or you could say any professional staff, I break it into 3 buckets. You've got your builders, you've got your bystanders, you've got your complainers, if you will. And I think you've got to first and foremost make a decision, like, what group am I in? Am I going to come in with a great attitude? Am I going to look at this as something I get to do versus have to do? So I think first and foremost, that's really critical. Our rallying cry here in Sacramento that I think I would follow if I was a sales rep is pretty simple. We're focusing on development, discovery, and discipline. So starting with discipline, it's, do you have a plan of attack each and every day? Are you making the most of each hour? Are you investing time versus spending time? What are your morning routines? What do your call blocking look like? Do you have your schedule in order and you're proactively attacking each day? Or are you very reactive and kind of winging it, knowing that you're not seeing your bosses often? There's less structure than there used to be. So I think that's a decision you have to make, is really making sure your discipline is down. I think that's really the foundation for everything else, which brings me to discovery. I don't know about you guys, but I don't think we're going to have a road to recovery. I think we're going to get back to a new normal. I think sports sales, I think selling in general is going to be much different whenever we emerge from this. And I think this is a huge opportunity to look at discovery, finding new ways to do old things. How can you lean into virtual selling on platforms like this that we're on? And how can you make sure that whenever life returns to normal, you've added those to your repertoire? And so are you using some of these setbacks as setups? Which brings me to development, probably most important, and most of my counterparts around the business that I've talked about or talked to have spent a ton of time on the training and development piece. But I think right now is the time to invest in yourself, prospecting, invest in reading books, listening to podcasts, investing in your craft, and making sure that you're using the setback as a setup. So I'll start broadly there: discovery, development, discipline. That's kind of how I've been thinking about the last few weeks.
I love that you included on the second piece of that from development, like also making sure that we think about not just, sharpening the axe and technically making ourselves better salespeople, but also thinking about how are we developing a pipeline? How are we self-prospecting? How are we adding to a lead list? Because I think that gets lost sometimes is, reps don't see a path towards outbound efforts, but this is all, we've talked about this constantly. This is all going to ramp up really, really quickly, both on our side and the consumer side whenever we get back. And to get in that conversation, a lot of that dialogue starts right now.
And I think to take that one step further, like the reps and the sales individuals and service reps that are the most proactive during these times are going to be the ones that I think are going to emerge the strongest. Life is going to return to normal. We're going to be working in an office at some point. Sports will be played. Are you going to be caught flat-footed by the news and saying, what do I do next? Or are you going to say, hey, I had 3 different business plans ready to go, an optimal, a contingency, and I'm ready to go. I did my self-prospecting. I've got my group sales strategy ready to rock. And this is just time that I think is very difficult to find traditionally in our business. We're so caught up in the day-to-day grind of selling and servicing and games and matches being played. I think this is an awesome time to invest in some of those areas that you might overlook traditionally.
Yeah, and I think especially on the group sales side where we have a difficult time developmentally prospecting and bringing in new large business, this is such a huge opportunity on that front. Jillian?
Yeah, I think, Ted, you hit a point on, spot on. But just thinking if I was going back in the rep as a rep, it kind of be oh, whoa, what's happening, right? And then just finding your routine and what works best for you. And I think just about being intentional every single day. And I think you said it as well, Ted, just as far as who's really going to step up in this time and be innovative and, really put themselves out there and manage up and bring all these ideas to the table, really crazy ideas that maybe no one has thought about or talked about, or maybe they were too scared to talk about. But this is just the perfect opportunity to lay that all on the table, talk through, work through, build out in a scenario A, B, C, because we don't really necessarily know what's going to happen. And looking within as well, just as far as the way that you do things, as far as your sales process, looking back and reflecting on things that you can improve on, things that you can tweak, looking for interpersonal conversations within our parent club or our organization with the Stockton Kings itself. Reach out to a lot of different people just to gain some feedback or get to know them on a personal level. Right now, it's all about being human to human, just on our client side of things. And getting to know them on a personal level and getting to know them a little bit better. And then as far as those representatives, there are people willing to talk right now, talk shop. I feel a lot of the different reps are really passionate about what they do in ticket sales. So it's a perfect opportunity to really dig in to some of those respective maybe group nights that you have a handle on, or maybe some weaknesses that you identify, and how you can get some best practices from some other reps amongst the league or outside of, our basketball G League representatives, but looking at other different sports industry teams as well and connecting that way.
We have a lot. Sorry, go ahead, Ted.
I was going to say the word that stood out to me that you said, Jillian, was intentional and being, purposeful each and every day and making sure that you're managing your day. It's not managing you. And I think two of the areas that I really wanted to piggyback on, you said, was managing up to your boss, managing up to some of the decision makers and adding value up the food chain at your company, but also adding value to your clients. So you mentioned internally, if you're a sales rep, what can you do to not wait for your service director or your sales director to say, hey, here's what we're doing for new business over the next few weeks. Here's some cool incentives. Here's what our renewal plan looks like. You're just as capable of looking around the business and aggregating, curating some of those great things other teams and companies are doing and saying, hey, Brett, you're my boss. Here's 8 cool ideas I saw from around the business that I thought might be helpful as you're putting together this really difficult renewal or rollover plan for whatever that might look like. Thought this might be helpful. Can you add value to, your boss up the food chain? Conversely, with your clients, are you reaching out and wrapping your arms around them and adding value, or are you just touching base? Or even worse, are you just sitting on your hands and waiting for news to share? I think A non-update is still an update and an answer at this point. And we certainly took the approach of being proactive, reaching out to all of our season ticket members, our group clients, and trying to add value. Everyone's working from home for the first time ever, just like us. Everyone's struggling with what we're going through. And so what can you do to reach out and share a cool article or share something that your club is doing that might be helpful for their business, or connect two of your clients? And so I think that people are being intentional and adding value both to their internal food chain, and also their clients are they're gonna come out of this stronger.
Well, I talk a lot on the group sales side. I think there's 4 areas that a group sales rep spends time: prospecting, developing, transacting, and executing. And man, what an incredible moment to be able to, we get, especially when our seasons start, we get so eaten up, and both of you have long seasons comparatively. Like, you get so caught up in the transacting and the executing side that rarely are we able to spend a significant amount of time prospecting and developing. And prospecting is pretty straightforward, but can you look at your book of business right now and isolate 20, 25, 30 clients that, aren't doing the level of business that they should be doing? Is your Girl Scout troop, has your Girl Scout night gone down in numbers every single year? Is this the time to get on a Zoom call and just kind of call that out and say, hey, we want to grow this, we want to make this better? Just because the in-arena sleepover or the infield sleepover has been easy to execute and it's got decent numbers, is that the right answer for where you're, and again, I'm using Girl Scouts right now for no real reason, but like, is that the right solution for Girl Scout night? Or is this the year to take some risks and innovate whenever we get back on it?
Yeah, I think
that's a Zoom
really
call. Oh, go ahead, Jillian. Yeah.
Sorry. I think that's a really good point, as far as like why reps like digging into their book of business and really trying to understand, how they can grow like certain accounts. I think it's really important for them to reach out to different representatives like across the different sports industry and ask how they do things, because something that might happen within the Boston Red Sox might necessarily not work for the Stockton Kings, but can we take a couple pieces from what they're doing and implement it here just to grow? So really challenging the reps too to think that way, be curious about a lot of different aspects to what they're trying to build out as far as like group nights or even like on the premium or the way that they just sell. So I think it's really important just to question and be curious in that regard.
And that is such an incredible point. And I always put the disclaimer on this, is that I think sometimes we take best practices way too straightforward.
Right.
Our sport is different, our market's different, the way that people are going to react to it is different. It's such an incredible moment to be able to look outside your group to get that. But just remember that the constituency that you're going to hit is different than the constituency that it is for the Red Sox. And so how do we make sure that we can take this best practice and say, this worked here, let's develop something within our marketplace that works more specifically for you, because you're 100% right. We should be looking externally to try to bring in those new opportunities.
Yeah, and you definitely know your market and your demographic like the best. So it's just taking it with a grain of salt and maybe elevating it or, changing it and mixing it up a little bit to work best for you.
And I would take that one step further, not just looking at what other teams and sports business properties are doing, but what are some other industries similar to ours, the carnival cruise or the cruise industry, hotels, airlines? How are they speaking to their customers during this time that they're not taking flights, they're not staying in hotel rooms, our customers aren't coming to games? What are some of the special offers, incentives? How are they speaking to customers, or what can we learn from them? So I've been challenging myself to get out of the sports business bubble as much as possible as well.
One of the cool ones I was gonna say, one of the cool ones I've really seen is there's a lot of restaurants right now, especially in New York City, where it's gonna be, so again, another place that's gonna be so competitive when people get a chance to go eat again. There's a lot of restaurants there that are selling $50 worth of food for $75 worth of food for $50. And knowing that discounting's awful, but understanding just this ramp that we're gonna have to take when we get back, there's some interesting thoughts to, well, maybe if we include partners and sponsors, we can create something that has a significant amount of value, but that understands that it's going to be really hard to sell really, really quickly whenever we get back. So Jillian, you said it, and I think we just talked a little bit about it, but this idea of looking within and doing some reflecting, I think this is such a cool time to be able to do that. I know I've been doing that personally. I'd imagine both of you guys have taken this opportunity to do that, knowing both of you. For a sales rep, what are some of those things that they can reflect on, especially if maybe they've been there for 6 months or a year, they don't have a huge track record. there's still things that they can reflect on and still things that they can look at. What do you think are some of those things that a rep should be looking at, whether they've been there 6 months or 3 or 4 years?
Yeah, so that's a great question too. And I think just as far as like my team, like my least tenured is about like 6 months, and then my most tenured with the team, as we've only been here for about 2 years, but it's about 2 years with the team. So I think like really digging into their pitches and their discovery and their additional questions, their close, being really intentional on the questions that they ask, and really trying to like dig deep into the conversation. So we've been doing a lot of role plays, as I'm sure that a lot of different teams have been doing, and matching them up with a lot of different reps, and then even through some of our reps in our parent club, Sacramento Kings, just to provide feedback. So I think feedback on our sales process and our sales pitch is something to look into. In addition to that, what I've also presented to the team is just as far as like the way that we do business, and reflect on our different departments. Necessarily like it's not your bread and butter. However, like what are some like innovative things that maybe you can bring to the table that you see that maybe someone who's living in that position like might not see, because they're like in it day in, day out, but more so coming from a place of like, how can we elevate some experiences, not necessarily negative, but like this is not your world, so it's a whole different set of eyes, just to provide some of that feedback. So we did that exercise as far as like looking at our different departments and things that maybe we can elevate a little bit more. And then in addition to that, a couple of the other things I like really like digging into is just like the way that we do business, and the way that we tackle some of our product mix, and just coming up with some other different ideas and strategies as far as like our sell-throughs. I know it's kind of unknown on the other side, but what are some like really creative, like innovative ways that we can, do things a little bit differently year over year?
Man, first off, like awesome for you guys for going like departments, like talking through different departments and doing that. It just reminded me, I remember back when I was at Teambo, and it was me and Chris Heck traveled the country for like 2 months, and we went to, I think, 4 or 5 different NBA teams. And what we did was, NBA was having a challenge. They were bleeding season ticket holders almost across the industry, because it was right around the time of the financial crisis. And we did this customer service focused training in each one of the places. And the ticket salespeople always had the worst ideas. Like the best ideas always came from like the director of the dance team, or like the head janitor. Like the worst ideas always came from because we're so insular when it comes to how we approach this. It was just a really incredible. So I haven't heard any other team doing that. So huge credit to you guys being that thoughtful, especially from a leadership standpoint. That's great. Ted?
No, that's phenomenal. I love that, Jillian. I'll take this answer 2 different ways. I think professionally, more tactically as a sales rep, I'd probably be spending a ton of time auditing the success or the lack of success I've had, and then also doing an autopsy of some of my best deals or some of my deals that have fallen apart. So can you look back at your book of business? Where are my deals coming from? Are there industries or group categories? I'm seeing particular themes, and why? Who are some other companies or groups similar that maybe I can target? Start to understand where you're having success and where you're not. Similar, look at some of your deals, your biggest ones that got done, and conversely, some of those deals you totally thought were going to get done that fell apart, and understand where in the sales process they went wrong. And I think it's a time to be incredibly honest with yourself and just figure out, where do I need to improve as a seller? And this is the time I mentioned earlier, we're never going to get this amount of time to invest in ourselves and our crafts back. And so if you're not doing it now, when will you? I think conversely, on the personal side, to dive into that, like this is a time to really invest in yourself, your mindfulness, your mental health, gratitude. I'm a huge gratitude guy, reading, podcasts. And so I think 2 things that have been massive for me, and we've tried to scale to our sales team as well, is 1, being incredibly grateful, starting each day and thinking, writing, sharing 1, 2, 3 things that we're grateful for. And it's like a superpower. I know gratitude's a very overused topic these days in business, but I've certainly loved it. And stay with me here, but I'll use the example of Brett or Jillian, like you guys, either of you gotten like a brand new car recently or a brand new pair of shoes?
Shoes, yeah.
Shoes, okay. So I've got a lot of shoes. In fact, I'm in my home office and I got a whole wall of them here.
Nice.
Unreal. But I don't know about you guys. When I get a new pair of shoes like Ultra Boost and I'm walking around, I see Ultra Boost everywhere. I'm like, that person has one and that one has it. Or I got a car and all of a sudden you see car cousins at a stoplight. And I think the same thing with gratitude. Like if there's awareness, you find things to be grateful for just by starting each day with it. And so I think, especially during a time like this, it's easy to wake up and think about what's not going well, all of the things that are falling on your plate personally or professionally. And I think simply in starting each day for myself with things I'm grateful for have made this period incredibly gone by incredibly well. So I think that's a small thing that reps can do that'll start each day on the right foot.
Yeah, I mean, I journal, right? And a lot of it's for, the mental health struggles that, I've had. But the first thing that you journal about is what are you grateful for? And I think, I also talk about what are some of the things I'm challenged by, but the first thing is what are you grateful for? Because you tend just to be more honest and open and vulnerable when you start talking about the rest of it. And when you approach the day that way, I mean, that's exactly the mindset we need to have towards our fans right now. If we get the chance to interact with them on an outbound standpoint, I think leading with gratitude and empathy, like we hope you're okay. We're grateful for you. How are you doing in this moment? That I've seen that be remarkably successful right now. And I think one more thing to talk about that you brought up, Ted, I'm a huge believer in this, but the overwhelming thing from the website is, I've had in some way, shape or form, I've had about 850 reps right into the website. Time management is by far the number one things that reps are challenged with when it comes to, I would never have guessed that having started the website. It would not have been probably in my top 5 or 6 things I would have guessed that a rep struggles with, but it's number one and it's not even close. And so taking a look at all the things that you do on a day in, day out basis, and Jillian, I love that you use the word intentional. That's a word that I'm such a huge fan of. How are you thinking about the way that you attack every single day and how intentional you are every single day? Like, is this the time to really clean up your pipeline so you have something that's sitting in front of you that's telling you what to do every day? Are you thinking about who you're calling and what the intention is? Are you setting goals for yourself each day from an outbound standpoint? And yeah, we may be in a tough environment on your cell phone to make 100 phone calls a day, but can you match that through social activity and videos and emails and phone? Like, activity can replace activity. That's one thing I'd like to talk about. And are you just being active and proactive, and are you being thoughtful about the way that you're spending your time? I think it's super critical. I think sharpening our axe is important. But the thing I always talk about is, I ran the National Sales Center and we did 3 to 6 hours of training every single day, and our reps still averaged 150 phone calls a day. So if you want to be outbound and you want to make those calls and you want to be active, you'll find a way to be able to do it in those moments. I'm interested for you guys, what are some unique things that you've both seen from an outbound standpoint? Maybe we'll start with Jillian on this one, that you've seen from an outbound standpoint that has had, I know it's hard to close anything right now, but has at least had some level of engagement.
Yeah, I'm actually excited just to work with all the Sales 3.0 tools that we have within the Kings organization. So 2 big ones that definitely stand out is One Mob. So video. So one of my reps, actually, Alyssa Dizelle, she made a great video being very like humanized as well, like from her house. Like this is like her home office. It's kind of like the normal for right now. And then was able to add additional links to that landing page, including that video of her personalized message with different resources that the Kings have been providing. So it can be anywhere from, healthy tips. It could be from like some like dribble practices that you can do. If they have kids, like coloring pages. So it's all kind of there on the landing pages. A lot of great content to share with some of our season ticket members. And then the second one was our Zip Whip, which is like the texting platform, has been like super helpful. I feel like using Zip Whip, like everyone is attached to their phone nowadays, and like even though they don't want to pick up a call, you get screened, that sort of thing, but like everyone pretty much looks at a text message. So it's been really well received, just like checking in, wellness checks, how are you doing, and receiving a response that way.
That's awesome.
That's huge. I want to piggyback on a couple things there, and I want to take one step back to the time management question that you were kind of alluding to, Brett. I think it's massive, and I think one point you were making was not mistaking activity for progress, and making sure that you're not coming in every day and just being busy, but you've got a plan of attack and a way to measure your success. And so I think one thing that I do, and I certainly did as a sales rep, was starting each day with what are the most important things I need to accomplish? What are the boulders, and not letting the pebbles that were on my to-do list knock me off course to actually win each day. So I think first and foremost, like, don't mistake making a lot of phone calls, sending a bunch of emails, listening to a bunch of TED Talks. It's a successful day. You've got to make sure that you're focusing on those boulders and you're accomplishing big tasks and moving your business, moving yourself forward as an individual. To tackle the one about outreach, what are we doing? I think first and foremost is leading with the heart, like you mentioned earlier, and making sure that we're being humans first and salespeople second. And you're not reaching out and being robotic and having a script or a very canned introduction statement. I think you've got to be very agile and be prepared for the conversation to go one way or the next. And so we're certainly doing a lot of training on the front end of the phone calls, but we're not making a lot of cold outreach via phone calls. We're trying to set those up via email, via video messaging, like OneMob, like Jillian mentioned. And I think two examples that I would probably highlight are we're trying to act, especially on the sales side, as an extension or an arm of the marketing and the community team. How can we be hyper personal to one of our clients or our prospects with an initiative that the company is doing that might help us start a conversation that might lead somewhere else? So a lot of teams like us, their players are filming videos of how to stay fit and active in their living room. How can you reach out to a youth sports team or a coach or a parent with kids and saying, hey, I know you're cooped up, you're struggling working from home and parent duty just like we are. Here's a cool video from some of our players of how to stay fit, active, distract your kids for a bit. Thought it might be helpful for you. That's been helpful for us on the season ticket side and just like the cold outreach side. On the community side, like many teams, we're really leaning into our community and giving back. How can you reach out to a company, a group, and say, hey, here's a cool initiative that I thought you might find helpful. Do you know any seniors in your neighborhood that we could drop off some free groceries for? We're doing this awesome program. Here's a video, more info about it. How can we help you? So I think it's really leading with the heart, being a human first, and looking to help versus looking to sell, and building up that equity that eventually will lead to a sale. I think you've got to be very patient and play the long game, really have the longest view in the room right now.
Yeah, I love that about the equity towards building in the sale. I think that's really cool. One thing that you mentioned, and I think this is really important, and that you guys are both sales leaders at this point in your career. This was something we started seeing when I was at the Houston Dynamo, was emails and phone calls had very little to do with how a rep was being or not being successful. What we saw was that actually pipeline movement, if they were moving between 20 and 25 people through their pipeline each day, whether it was an introduction or cold to warm or warm to hot, that was actually a much better indicator if they were being consistent on that front than any metric that we saw. I'm interested, to hear from both of you your viewpoint on that, because there's still that old school person that in me who started selling in 2005, which I know will date me, where it was attach the phone to your ear, sit down, and that's still how we get credit cards. It's still face-to-face, it's still over the phone. But yet those were not the metrics that I saw that really moved the business, most specifically when I had, Microsoft Dynamics and a really robust CRM system in Houston. So I'm interested to hear both your takes on that, because I like to think I'm new school in that, but there's that person that grew up with literally only the phone that says, well, if you attach the phone to your ear and make 200 calls, you're still going to be the best rep in the room. So
I couldn't agree more with you, Brett. I certainly was the sales associate that was banging out 150, 200 dials, and that's just not where the business is right now. And to your point, I think what we inspect as leaders and what we measure is what the sales team is going to follow. And so every day, if you're shouting out the top performers for phone calls and email sends and LinkedIn messages, you're going to start to drive and incentivize a type of behavior that ultimately probably isn't leading to what you want to. So I think for us, it's typically pipeline management, deals created, stages moved, as you mentioned, and appointments booked, appointments set. Are you actually moving the ball closer to getting done? And I think a byproduct of that is the phone calls, the emails, the outreach that leads to that. But every rep is going to be different. Somebody might need to make 100 phone calls to set and book 10 meetings. Somebody else might need 50. And I think it's really critical that you're coaching the result. You're not coaching the activity and leading your sales team to mistake what I mentioned before, activity for progress. So for me, it's certainly pipeline management.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, agree with Ted too, and with Brett. Like, even though it's not like too long ago, but things have changed. But it was like smile and dial, baby, and like call after call after call. So that was like how I got things done, like during those times, and like in emails as well. But it was like very much like phone calls, which I really do feel like the phone call isn't dead per se. However, there's a lot of different tools out there and a lot of different ways that you can be creative to get in front of your prospect. I just like now like live by like face to face, and that's like what's really important and what has worked like in our market. Getting face to face in meetings. You know, how can you give that really cool arena tour? How can you show them our front office? And then of course like go to their business as well too. So that's a huge one. But I think just like really as far as like just being like creative and then being intentional in your conversations, like Ted mentioned, like how are you moving along those stages and like critiquing and a lot of feedback as far as like the rep and manager relationship, like speaking on like how did the conversation go, what was your like DNS like afterwards, and like moving that deal forward. So I think that's the more important thing. I think back then it was all about like how many like phone calls or activities that you can have, but like now it's really about the quality of the conversation and then the intent to move that deal forward.
And I know, oh, sorry, go Ted.
I was going to say, Brett, I think this is where I know my game went from good to great, and many salespeople that I see take the next step in their game is when they start looking at both the art form and the science or the math of sales, and stop looking at their job like a telemarketer and more like an entrepreneur. And the art form of sales, like the question pass, open-ended questions, running appointments, a lot of the sales training we do, I think we do that well as a sports business. I think on the science side, we talk a lot about casting a wide net, making a lot of phone calls, adding to the top of the funnel. We talk a lot about closing at the end. It's that middle stage in the pipeline, advancing individuals that I think we need to do a much better job of. And I think right now is the time to sharpen your pencils and work on that part of your game. Are you understanding your average deal size, your average timeline to close, what you can do to shrink the size of that? What activities are actually moving the needle and getting a business closer to buying or a family closer to buying, and really doing things in the middle of that pipeline to nurture and advance deals? I think that's where we certainly fall short. And I know I definitely did as an early sales rep. I made a lot of calls. I got people that were interested, and I tried to create a ton of urgency. I didn't do enough in the middle piece to advance deals. And so I love that you brought up stage changes. And the more that we've unpacked this in the conversation, I think it's clear why that was such a strong stat for you guys.
Well, it's funny, consistently, whenever I do my sales trainings, the things that always seem to get the best reviews are when I talk about utilizing resources on maybes. So the minute you get a maybe, what resources can I apply towards those maybes? Is it a coach phone call? Is it a stadium tour? What can I do to be able to make sure that that person understands that I'm there and willing to earn their business? And then by far the one that I get the most response on is when I talk about lead qualification, because I think that's something that industry wide, like coming from CEB over to sports, like at CEB, we were taught like constant lead qualification. Like, how serious is this person? Is this person truly going to do it? When you hear a kiss off, are you trying to qualify that person in that moment to be able to do it? And in sports, there's still this very industry wide, like, can you put that in an email? Yeah, totally. Like, I need to talk to my wife. Go ahead, right? Like,
we get stuck in the friend zone hard.
Right.
And so I think this is that moment to really take a step and take a look at your leads and start thinking, you know, all these people that I've spent so much time on, like, are these people that were really serious or not really serious? And I chased them for 3 months. I wasted 40 phone calls on them. You know, it's sometimes making the reps understand this pain. I talk about it in my training, but I call it 12-3-1, right? Like, every 12 people you call back, you miss 3 conversations, you miss making 1 sale. And you may be like, well, that's not totally accurate. You're right. It's not totally accurate, but you have to feel pain to make adjustments, right? Like, you have to believe that when I call people back multiple times, that I am actually cutting into my opportunity with real people who might have a real interest in buying, as opposed to burning that on people that have no real interest in buying.
And pressure testing and setting definitive next steps, it's going to save you so much time in the future. And I think that's something that gets so overlooked. And you mentioned it, like if you go back and you do an autopsy, like I mentioned earlier about a deal that you didn't close, I bet if you really are honest with yourself and you think about the time you invested in phone calls and CRM and typing them emails, the time you lost from sleep at night dreaming about that prospect, if you reinvested that in an area with somebody that was real, holy cow, your pipeline would be taken off right now. And so I think now more than ever to understand, like, what are the things that are actually moving deals along and not getting stuck in the friend zone, not mistaking a friendly conversation for a successful one. Now's the time to understand those things about your book of business. And so I think that's a great point you made.
I love what you said, Ted, there, like just being honest. And I think as a young sales rep, you have to kind of like go through it to learn it. Like once you hear someone who wants to buy like a $40,000 package, you're like, I'm not letting go. But it takes some time to understand that like this person was just probably blowing smoke, but like, what are those like really qualifying and dig deep questions that you can ask like during that discovery portion, and move that process forward. So I think too, just as far as like just being a sales rep, like be honest with yourself. Like what is the percentage this person's going to buy, and don't spend all this time on these prisoner of hopes, and be okay to like find those people that, are really truly interested.
Well, and Jillian, just that's 100% right. And take it one step more. Like, this is a really good time if you're a sales rep to take a look and say, do I really know my buyer's why? Like, am I passing information along and someone's just buying because I'm just skimming the top of the water and that's who I'm getting?
Right.
Or am I really converting those people that are a maybe? Am I understanding why they purchase? Is this a divorced father who's looking for more time with his daughter? Is this a business that's looking to make sure they get their clients a little bit more face to face because that's where they close? Like, if you go through your client list and you go through the people you closed, and better yet, the people who said no to you, would you be able to look at that list, go down that list and say, this is why they were going to buy, this is why they were going to buy, this is why they were going to buy? And like, I know, because that, like, I always say, like, a lot of my sales training was written from all the mistakes I made as a salesperson, right? Like trying to fill in some of those holes so other people don't have to do it. And I just remember a couple, like I had a really good first month at CEB just because I went on a ton of meetings and I closed a few. But then when all of a sudden my meetings started to shrink a little bit, I'd come back and be like, oh, I know this person's going to close. And my boss would be like, well, why is this person going to close? And it's like, they really seem to like me. And she's like, well, how are they going to use what we have, like our resources? I was like, I don't know. I have no idea, but they're definitely going to close, and it's shocking the number of those people that just never closed. And once I was able to understanding, I don't have to understand that problem better and more intimately than that business does. What I need to do is show them a route to being able to support them or help them through the resources we have. And that's a cool thing that doesn't change from CEB to sports. We're not going to solve the problem for the business. That's doing a disservice to the business itself, but we can absolutely be a way that helps get that business to be able to solve that problem. And if we're helping them, and I just wrote about this the other day and it got a great response. Like, if you're helping someone with a problem, you're going to get access to way more money than if you're fighting for a budget line item. And I think that's a really important thing that we emphasize to reps. Humans are spending more money towards problems. Businesses are spending more money towards problems. If all you're doing is talking about a budget line item, man, you're fighting for something really finite, or you're fighting for something that you might lose to not just the baseball team in Stockton or the Kings in Sacramento. You might lose it to the water park down the street. Like, you're just inviting competitors that should be nowhere near the conversation of what we're able to provide people.
Mm-hmm.
The budgetary objection always gets me, because you can help them make more money. They're going to go to their boss any day of the week and find a line item, a trade-off to make the deal make sense. So I couldn't agree with you more, Brett. And I think the other thing that you're hitting on is asking questions and not being afraid of the answer. At the end of an appointment, not being afraid of being told no. And especially during times like this, don't mistake that great virtual meeting that you had or that great phone call and be afraid to wrap the phone call and find out, hey, when life returns to normal, are you willing to entertain again? Would you be open to coming to our stadium? When can we reconnect? Like, not just reaching out to reach out, but making sure you have a means to an end, and not letting your prospects get stuck in the friend zone because you're afraid of being told no, being that prisoner of hope, as Jillian put it. I think it's just so critical right now.
My old
Yeah.
boss, Brian Pfeiffer at the sales center had this great line that I totally stole. I wish I had it when I was at CEB, but he was like, man, he's like, I didn't know it because he worked for the Minnesota Timberwolves at the time. He's in Minnesota United now. And he was just like, man, that's crazy. You guys had a Minnesota Timberwolves budget before I even walked into this room. Like, it's just an honest, like such a cool, honest pushback, because there's no way an executive's going to take that personally, but they get to understand that Brian's there for something more than just fighting for a line item in a budget. Sorry, Jillian, I cut you off.
No, all good. And I was just going to add to just what Ted was saying too, and just being confident on asking those questions. Like, get it all on the table so you know where you stand on both sides and to move forward. So don't be afraid of the no. Like, yes, we get told no all the time, but better to find out now than those prisoner or hopes or whatnot and locking yourself, kind of in this like pseudo area. But, just have the confidence just to ask those questions, human to human, because we're looking to, solve a problem, or if a problem that they didn't have, it's our job to open that up and solve it.
No's suck, but they are way better than like spiraling into hatred of someone that you used to like just by the time you're on the 12th phone call and they're not calling you back, you're like, oh, Jillian, just pick up the phone.
Yes.
It's just not
it's so true. We've all been there with that one prospect that just drives you insane because you've been held up on the maybe, or they keep stringing you along. So one thing I know you train on, Brett, that I wanted to highlight is like giving somebody permission to say no, and recognizing that it's hard for our prospects or our clients to tell us those uncomfortable things. Put yourself in their shoes. You just had a 5, 10, 15-minute great conversation, a great virtual Zoom. Super awkward at the end of that to be like, hey, it was great getting to know you, Brett. I'm never buying. Please don't call me again. But they're going to save you in their phone as Brett, sales guy, and probably not pick up the next time.
Right.
And all of a sudden you agree to a follow-up phone call or an appointment that prospect has no intention of making, because it's easier to agree to that than saying, hey, I'm not interested. And so I think especially wrapping your phone calls with that respect contract, that permission to tell us no, I think is critical, especially right now, and saying like, hey, Brett, I know I called you during the midst of this uncertainty. If you and your company are not going to be able to entertain next year, I can appreciate that and want you to know you can certainly tell me no. Like, I don't want to be a rock in your shoe over the next couple of months. Like, does this virtual meeting in a week from now make sense, or do we need to push it off a little bit? So I think giving your prospects permission to say no is critical always, but especially right now.
I want to be a resource, not a nuisance, right? Like, that's a line that I always used to use. Like, I want you to see my phone ring and you want to pick up, not be like, oh my gosh, that's a guy I have to avoid again. Well, this was awesome. This is so much fun. I super appreciate you both doing this. This is a question I've asked to end most of these, and I think it's just kind of funny. What was that moment when you were just like, oh my gosh, this is really nuts? Like, I always say, like, I was in an HEB parking lot picking up. So I was in Sacramento. I got back home. We went to my in-laws' lake house. We finally got back to Houston, probably like a week after everything had been super crazy. And we were in the parking lot at HEB, and we got a text when we were going to pick up our groceries. I was like, stay in your car, open your trunk. And I was like, oh my gosh, life has changed so ridiculously. Like, I had a mini freak out in the car with my wife. So what was that moment for both of you? I think these are neat, that you were just like, oh my gosh, what is going on right now?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Not everyone at once.
I know. I'm like trying to think, like, there are so many things that kind of just like came at once. I think it was just kind of like the initial, when everything was like kind of like going on, we actually had a game that was happening when all this kind of like on the back end from the NBA. Adam Silver was thinking about shutting it down. Sacramento actually like had everyone like leave their building. They had a game going on. They didn't even play the game. And then for us, for Stockton, we were just trying to get into like quarter 2, get to quarter 3, just get the game like done and get it in before like anything was like really out there regarding just the NBA and just kind of like the postponement of the rest of the season. I think just like during the game, like no one really knows like what was like really going on. And then it's like me and my management staff, and we're like, okay, like this scenario A, B, and C, and got to think fast. And then we have like our NBA security there, like, okay, here's a scenario. We might call the game. We might not call the game. We're going to wait on NBA. So that was, I think, like initially, since we had like a game going on and like didn't know what was going to happen, that was kind of probably my like, well, this is crazy going on right now.
I'd point to two moments. First was obviously the NBA's decision. They got out in front of this and arguably caused this huge catalyst nationwide, not just in sports. And that was a very holy cow moment. And then I think more recently, seeing some of the baseball leagues that have like mannequins and robots in the stands that are well ahead of the virus than we are, saying, holy, like we're not getting back to normal anytime soon. No. We're not going to have fans, back in the stadium in the normal capacity anytime, in the distant future. And so I think that was when it became very real for me after the initial NBA announcement.
I mean, no matter how progressive your state is, like every state's going to have to mandate you can put 20,000 people in the same building together. And that's not on the horizon. And I think that's an important thing. And, I know you, Ted, you said it earlier, but, having the longest view in the room right now and understanding that a lot of the stuff that you're doing today may not necessarily pay off today. And that can be really challenging for a sales rep who a lot of times is judged on what you're doing today. Yeah. Having that incredibly long view, I think, is going to be really, really important because I said this and I think I've repeated this ad nauseum. This is either an excuse or an opportunity. You're either going to be fearful of coming back to work whenever that normalcy sets in, or you're going to be like, this is Christmas morning. This is like an on sale. I am completely prepared for this. I cannot wait to reach out to all these people I've been cultivating over that time. And I don't think there's going to be a lot of in between. I really think it's going to be a huge divide. And I think it's going to be, I don't think what we can see reps doing in, your CRM system right now is going to be really telling. I think what we're going to learn a lot about sales reps is what happens the first day that we're back in the office and what happens in the first few days and weeks that we're back in the office. That's going to be really telling about what a rep does.
Could not agree more. Right. And I think it's now more than ever is the time to use this setback as a setup and make sure that you're improving and getting better. And I think the key to sustainable success in business, but especially in our industry, is out developing and out learning the people around you versus outselling and outperforming them. And if you're short-sighted right now and focusing on, what are my activities compared to my peers? Am I doing what my boss asked me to do and focusing on the performance, the outselling? You're missing a huge opportunity to learn, grow, and develop right now. So I could not agree with you more. That mindset is massive right now.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome, guys. Well, I really appreciate it. And I will, with that, thanks, everyone.
Love it.
Thanks.
We'll see you.